back to Top Shelf Tactics. This is a show where we explore what it takes to succeed in the cannabis industry, as well as how that definition of success is changing as the industry continues to evolve. I'm your host, Michael Gu, and today we have Jordan Stauder on the show. Jordan's been in the industry for over a decade now. He started out working at a dispensary, eventually transitioning to cultivation, learning how to grow, learning facility design, and then eventually helping to start a successful company and brand called Rocky Mountain Green, eventually exiting. Nowadays, he helps new cultivators and license holders grow cannabis sustainably. And he also serves on the Cultivation Advisory Board for the NCIA. So I'm really excited to have him on the show, not just to hear about his story, how he got started, as well as his perspective, given his various roles in the industry, but also see what he thinks about the future of cannabis markets. So let's get started. All right, Jordan, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Go!
How's it going?
It's you, Mike.
Yeah. So where are you currently?
In Boulder, we got our first snow. We got like 2 or 3 inches of snow outside.
Okay. Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. I know you like to travel coast to coast with all these conferences and clients.
Yeah, well, next is obviously like MJ Biz, but also going down to New Mexico on Sunday and New Mexico on Sunday, Texas on Wednesday, MJ Biz the following like Monday or something. So all over the place. Yeah,
it's coming up. Well, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. Talking about your background in the industry. We just want to hear, first of all, if you want to give an intro about, your background and, what would you do before you joined the cannabis industry, and then how did you get started?
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of almost don't even remember that because like it's just about been my only meaningful job in my life. So, but no, man, like seriously, but going back all the way, I guess. I mean, all of it is kind of instigated by a move to Colorado, and I moved to Colorado back in like 2009, looking for school. So I ended up going to CU Boulder for environmental studies. You're in Texas right now, Michael. You can probably understand how there were not any like environmental sustainability programs in Texas anywhere like back in the early 2000s. It's Texas.
Very specific, but yeah. I've been here for a year.
yeah, I feel you. Well, I'm from there, so yeah,
that's right.
Nothing around. So I got out of the state, went to Colorado, started getting engaged in the environmental like sustainability programs there. But like, dude, I don't know what it was, maybe 2-3 months like after I moved to Colorado, I was in like a massive ski injury accident in Breckenridge, where I I took a snowboard to the neck from somebody who was like flying through the air. You know what I mean? So with that, and this is what people tell me, because I don't remember a bit of it, like none of it, but I was airlifted out of there on a helicopter, taken to the hospital. I was in an ICU for like a week or so or something like that. Woke up, ripped off the thing off my neck and walked out. And then from there, I basically just walked straight into a job at a dispensary because, weed was basically the only thing that helped besides any kind of pills that folks were trying to send me out with. We were just talking about how I broke my foot. And I tell those people, I'm like, dude, I don't need no painkillers, nothing like that. I got plenty of edibles, concentrates, flour. I got it all. Don't worry about it. From that, I got a job as a bud tender in a small dispensary in Boulder. From there, parlayed that up to multiple different licenses on the dispensary side and opening up a couple on the grow side and on the lab side with a pretty direct focus at that time to serve the medical market here in Colorado. So kind of helping the same people that, are dealing with some of the same stuff that cannabis helps me with and gets me off of medications like that and stuff like that. So, kind of fell into it as a bud tender, worked my way up management and got tired of people ripping up joints in a dispensary lobby, and then I opened up a grow in a lab. Turned out to be the first hydrocarbon lab in Boulder County at the time. So,
and what was the name of that lab?
it was Rocky Mountain Green at the time. They're now known as Stardust Concentrates, but that's after we sold out in about 2020 or something like that. But since 2018, I've had multiple people, just friends of mine in the industry here, just kind of asking me for any kind of advice that I can give them on like their build outs, the equipment to use, SOPs to run, and everything like that. So since 2018, been helping out multitude of clients both here in Colorado and mostly around in other states around the United States to build up these types of things with a sustainability focus that I originally came to Colorado for. So
yeah, I'm curious, can you discuss more about that sustainability focus? Because I know in your current consulting, that's a big thing that you guys sell, is the sustainability by design, right? So what does that mean, and why should people care about that?
Well, that's the biggest thing. I mean, like the first thing that comes to mind whenever you're like talking sustainability is just environmental sustainability, right? And that's a factor in all this, but at the same time, it's one of those things that like the sustainability of the business like can't be sacrificed on the altar of like the sustainability of the environment, right? So the business still has to work, and we can only basically take that so far if we're talking about an indoor grow. But with that, the more sustainable the business gets, it seems that the lower cost of goods sold that company can basically bet on, because energy and labor being your number one and number two biggest kind of expenses in a grow. So once you're up to run, so sustainability definitely on that end, both in terms of like energy, using the right equipment that's integrated and not just working in silos and things, as well as kind of optimizing the way that your labor flows throughout your facility, and kind of having all of those things jive with the SOPs that you're actually running there, and the design. So all of that stuff is one big integrated system.
And for somebody who's, let's say, just trying to get into the industry or applying for the first license, how are there any tips you would give them in terms of achieving sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, a big portion of that is kind of in the initial kind of how you're going about setting this thing up. So like your equipment's going to play a big part of it in your design and stuff. You want to make sure that like, hey, you're not you don't have any kind of labor component that's like you got a dry room way over here and then the flower room's way over here, and you're walking all the way across the facility in front of bedrooms and stuff like that. So with your workflow optimization, you want to make sure that with a designer for a facility that you're thinking about, make sure those people know that they're not building a town hall or anything like that. Like the number one occupant of this like facility is plants. Like that, you know what I mean? So think about the plants, and then everything in terms of all your high energy use stuff, like your HVAC, your lighting, everything like that. Look for really high efficiency rated type of stuff that will contribute to, lower energy use, lower labor inside the facility, both in terms of people and how often they're working inside of rooms. And then with that, that should support the low COGS and stuff like that at the end of the day. So it's just, look at it in terms of everything you're using to build out your facility are things that are going to cost you on a per pound basis going forward.
Got it. Yeah. And like, how do you think, since, you've been involved in the industry and you've already gone through starting your own grow and, manufacturing facility and then kind of an acquisition, what do you think that process taught you to where, to inform your decisions nowadays with, consulting other clients in their first facilities?
Yeah. I mean, with everybody that I'm working with, I kind of set an expectation towards what is the market going to look like in 5 years, right? Because all this stuff is moving like at light speed. You know what I mean? So along those lines, we want to, in this climate right now, prepare for a federally legalized market, right? That's going to be subject to different kind of regulations and things that we're not subject to now. But we can still look forward and prepare for those with the facilities that we build now so that they are compliant going forward, right? So that's one of the big things, is just kind of, at least on my side, having that industry insight, because I do sit as the chairman of the Cultivation committee for the NCIA, and sit on the policy council as well. So have a little bit of insight towards where some of this stuff is going. And it's good to have that and deliver to clients. But I mean, it all boils down to and integrates into the SOPs and the facility design, equipment choice, and all of it.
Yeah, and how do you think the industry itself has changed in the last year, even 2 years, all the way until since you got started?
Well, I mean, 2012 and 2014, there were times that we were dealing with regulation changes on a bi-weekly basis, things that in my lab, I remember distinctly getting in a batch of labels that were all compliant and everything like that. Lawyers had checked it over, all that stuff. And then basically the day after that, we received all that stuff into the facility. They changed the labeling rules. You know what I mean? So none of that stuff was compliant anymore. Those things we're not really dealing with a whole lot these days in all the different states, right? But back in those days, we were still figuring stuff out. We didn't know that we could do composting, so we got those rules changed. The child resistant container rules back in the day that came about, those were big, and stuff like that. But nowadays, it seems that the states that are coming along, all of them have a little bit of a learning curve having to do with the regulators that are writing that stuff down, because oftentimes it's up to the interpretation of both the operator and the authority, and sometimes those can be different. But so that's getting ironed out a little bit more. It's good to see kind of on the federal side a little bit more conduciveness there towards the common sense that is the legalization of cannabis. But on each individual state level, you'd be surprised at what the actual similarities are between those regulations. So every state's doing it a little bit different nowadays, but at least it's just a little bit different, and it's not changing every week.
Yeah, that's fair, because I know with our experience working with clients in 18 states, the compliance can be different. For the smallest things, right? For containers or different reasons for waste, whether or not you can, promote a plant to veg while putting a label on, or you have to put the label on during flowering. So there's a lot of different
8 inches, 4 inches container, it's all over the map. And I mean, if you want to point at one market that's all out of whack right now, point at Maine, because believe it or not, Maine on the recreational side, it's just basically anywhere else. You gotta test for everything. So your potency, microbials, pesticides, metals, all of that stuff. But where you would really think that you have to do that testing is on the medical side. But Maine doesn't require you to test for anything on the medical side, literally nothing. So, it doesn't make any sense there. So there's still some of that balance and common sense is still being worked out.
Yeah, I know definitely some other states in the Midwest that are also kind of back and forth with.
We can talk about Oklahoma. We can talk about
Oklahoma, even Massachusetts. I know there's people that have hemp farms where they started rolling those hemp farms up with the recreational farms or the medical farms in Massachusetts, where they had to use the same compliance system all of a sudden, even though they were hemp, which didn't really make any sense. But I think
it's tough on the hemp side for sure.
What's your outlook on federal legalization? I know nobody can really predict it, but regardless of what happens federally, as well, in terms of the states right now, like where are you the most excited about?
States wise?
Yeah, and I guess I guess if federal legalization happens,
Yeah.
if it doesn't,
Well, I'll tell you what, like if
where are you most excited?
yeah, so one of the biggest kind of implications for that I'm kind of preparing for and just looking to prepare all facilities and operators with, like right now, is to prepare for an environment where like you can trade across state lines. You know what I mean? Because that would be one of the things that's going to be coming down the pipe. So if you're like a greenhouse producer in February, right? In, let's say, the upper part of Michigan versus down in Arizona, if you don't have to worry about state lines, then the costs just associated with like the geographic determinism on that means that that Arizona operation should be producing at a lower rate, and therefore whenever prices start to equalize around the country, that operator in Arizona is going to be much more sustainable from a business sense than other folks. So whenever we see any kind of federal movement and stuff, I'd be watching out for like the state line thing falling, especially up in the Northeast, like New York, New Jersey, up in that area, because with that, you're no longer just operating in the silo of your own state. So some of these states right now that are benefiting from really high kind of wholesale prices on product, we'll have to compete with the others that kind of got started under a different licensing structure, and that licensing structure may have increased the competition on those licenses in that particular state to a point where the wholesale price is very low, right? So
Yeah,
places like
sure.
Colorado and Oregon and Oklahoma and stuff like that.
Yeah, and other than prices, what do you think like current operators, cultivators, manufacturers, distributors should be aware of, in terms of interstate trade, and how it impacts their operations? Like, should they be packaging things differently? Should they be running their facilities differently?
Man, it's going to turn into like, I always think that there's a craft grow component to this whole thing where like you have your mid shelf, right? Your mass produced, whatever type of nug that's good, but it's still, not kind of hands-on, you know what I mean? Yeah, all that. But there's still going to be like a craft grower component. So branding is going to become, a much more important thing going forward. Branding,
more competitive.
Yeah, but not only that, it's like, you can look right now and see what the difference is in regulation in terms of like the operations of the facility and even facility designs are just across state lines or whatever. What folks also need to prepare for is to be compliant in that type of world where you're subject to the regulations in a much more stringent state, because you're trying to sell there. You know what I mean? So I would prepare them for the most stringent kind of regulations statewide right now and just build on that model.
Got it. And off the top of your head, which states should we be aware of that are the most?
Dude, Jersey's popping. Jersey's going to be great. New York's going to be great. Like all up there, they need a lot of nug. Illinois, you're going to have a lot of craft growers coming up and running like pretty soon. So you're going to see a lot more like new products, new brands, new supply, and therefore, new prices probably. So stuff like that. Also you got, California, which really needs to do something about its like, the new growers that's coming up, and how that affects their grid from a sustainable component. So Jersey's popping, Illinois is great, and then Mississippi, believe it or not. So some of these southern states too are kind of coming along these days too. So
and I guess I'm curious when you said that California has to be careful with its grid and its sustainability when it comes to new growers. How do you think with California's example, other states have handled their sustainability, and is California one to look at, or should we learn from their mistakes?
It's a learning from a mistakes thing, but I think with that, it's more of a component of like when you got started type of thing. You know what I mean? Like even here in Colorado, when we got started in the early, like in the 2000s or whatever, early 2000s, the technology was what it was. You know what I mean? People were growing with streetlights because there was no other option, right? HPS.
Yeah.
Right. But nowadays with some of that tech and stuff, what you see is like one of the biggest driving determinant factors in terms of the energy input to those rooms is going to be your lighting, right? So that's where a lot of utilities is kind of centered in on that when it comes to any sort of rebates or whatever, or mandates having to do with what you put into your grow. So what you see around the country is a lot of like lighting power density rules that you won't see in California, that are designed basically to make these grows more energy efficient from the get-go. So I mean, if you're putting in like a lower wattage light into the a horticultural light into the grow rooms, then it's a direct relationship between the wattage of that light and the amount of HVAC you have to use to offset that. Right. Mm-hmm. So with that, we're seeing most often a focus on the lighting side of things and how that drives the rest of the gross energy use. But there's also some groups out there that are working on rebates for kind of those really, really efficient HVAC systems. But you still have on the flip side, you still have groups in California that are putting up new grows and new expansions and stuff that are putting in really energy non-efficient lighting and HVAC packaged units and stuff like that just kind of continues the status quo for those growers because they're just too comfortable with the legacy technology and not looking to make a change. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. One of the biggest instigations to making that change is regulation, right? So if they're not told to do it, they don't really need to, you know what I mean? As long as they know that their margins are there. So, there's been some rumblings around that California is going to change that, but it's also a thing where like, I say we were growing back in the day with streetlights because that was the only option, because like even back in the day, LEDs, and I mean back in the day being like 4 years ago, LEDs just weren't there with the spectrum and with the intensity, mostly the intensity, to grow at the level that we were doing previous with legacy tech. So, but things are changing. That's the point.
Yeah, for sure. I know that, California, Michigan, Colorado, they're thinking of, putting in caps on the number of licenses in order to help stabilize the prices. And I've heard a lot of, opinions about how that might not be the best case for free market economics and competition. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, they can do whatever they want, basically. My thoughts on that are like, look at Illinois. You know what I mean? Illinois is basically run by the big MSOs and stuff that have just snatched up just about everything whenever they were allowed to. But now we're trying to have the craft growers come out. That's going to affect a market that to now has been artificially inflated just due to what you're talking about. Like the supply was limited by the limiting of licensing. You know what I mean? So, whereas here in Colorado, prices are kind of stabilized. The good actors are still, producing in this state. And on the dispensary shelves, you can get a vape cart for 1 gram, $30. In Illinois, for instance, that 1 gram vape cart is going to be like $120. You know what I mean? So there's states right now that are more advantageous for folks to become operational in, just due to that, artificial limit to the supply and stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned Illinois, because I have heard about kind of the MSO grab in consolidation, and it's interesting to hear you say that you think there's a big opportunity for craft growers in terms of like you know, craft growers looking forward, right? 5 years or once interstate trade happens, federal legalization happens, what would be your, you know, suggestions for a craft grower trying to get into a market that, you know, might be nationwide?
Focus on branding and specialize in something at the base level. You know what I mean? The biggest one of the biggest kind of indications of basically a failure of one of these cannabis companies is like you start up and you're trying to do everything. You know what I mean? You have every type of extract, you got all the flower, you got 70 strains, you got all this other stuff, right? But you know, the folks that I see, you know, being successful there is like, hey, they're doing one thing and they do it really, really freaking well. Like whether it's bubble hash or rosin or like bougie flower in an eighth in a box on the top shelf. Like, you know, it's having that focus and planting that flag and defending it basically. So if you can plant the flag now, you're in a much better place than, you know, whenever the state lines fall in the future, really.
Mm-hmm. And I guess looking outside of the US, right, like internationally, I know you've been involved in some projects abroad, and you know, here over at FloEnvy we have as well. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are. There is a theory that potentially in the future, you know, other than a few select markets in the US, the majority of flower will be grown internationally and shipped and imported into the US, you know, in bulk wholesale prices. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that theory and and how that might affect the whole industry?
I don't know, man. I think that's I think it's a pretty plausible theory, to be honest with you. And let's look at kind of just, you know, sticking with a dispensary's shelf, look at like the bottom shelf of your flower, right? It would be like much more advantageous for that dispensary to buy from a group that is in a place geographically that like can grow that naturally year round. So like Colombia, right? If folks are looking for input material into a lab in the United States, then I would see people buying a ton from Colombia, right? Quite literally tons. And stuff like that. So with that, your input prices on all of your extracts will hit the floor, you know? That being said too, I mean, you know, I don't know, man. I haven't put too much thought like to the day where I'm going to see like some nug grown in the UK, like on some shelves here in the United States, but that would be dope. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Some Boris Johnson Kush.
Oh, that'd be great, dude. Yeah. The Churchill, you know what I mean? But like, you know, everybody, well, I don't want to say everybody, but what I've been seeing at least, and I'm focused like mainly in the United States these days, got a couple that are east and west of North America these days. But it looks like, I mean, even seeing from Germany and Portugal and everybody else like over there, that like, man, they're basically treating this like, you know, the legalization of states here in the United States. You know what I mean? So one person does it over here, and then they're like, maybe it'd be good for us. Let's start kicking it around, and then that'll come down to a vote at some point. You know what I mean? So same thing with the states here.
And eventually
I see some similarities there. I wouldn't mind seeing some legitimate like Turkish weed on some shelves here though. Or like some
I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
Finger hash, dude. You know what I mean? Like some stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
I mean, definitely some of the hand rubbed at the field. You know,
what if you get Cuban cannagars, dude? Come on, that would be dope.
I'm sure you could find that. You could find that these days if you visited.
Yeah, probably. Florida's legal.
Got to swim over there. But yeah, man, it's been good hearing about your, you know, all your background and insights. You know, I appreciate it. You know, how old are you now?
I'm 33 years old.
Oh wow, still young, man.
I got started in cannabis when I was 22 years old.
Okay. So, wow. Yeah. So
whenever if there's any kind of question towards like, oh yeah, how does this relate towards anything else that you've done in your life? This is basically it, dude. before this, I was a certified arborist, had my own business, doing trees and tree work around Boulder, but been an entrepreneur my whole life anyway. So
Nice. So you think you're going to stay in the industry forever? You're a lifer?
Yep.
Nice.
For sure, dude. Like if they need anybody to sit there in front of Congress and tell them why, happy to do so, dude. Give me a call.